Okay, thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee people. I'm Councillor William J. Routley, the Chair of this Scrutiny Committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody to it this morning, those in the Chamber and those remotely taking part at home, and to anybody else that are joining us for whatever reason they seem fit. Before I go into it, I have a legal declaration which I have to read out, so please bear with me. The Scrutiny Committee is being conducted remotely. No, it isn't. It's remotely and in person, in accordance with the coronavirus regulation, meeting protocols agreed by the Council, which operates alongside Council standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public, and I'll request that you switch off your cameras, that's those at home, and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure that there is no unnecessary noise background and to help with audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council standing orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure that the chat function for those at home is switched on and that they use this facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak or to my officers on a particular item. Please do not speak until you're invited to do so by the Chair of the Committee. Thank you. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies today, Chair.
Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest on anything that's coming up? Yes, Councillor Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify.
No, Councillor. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting previous meeting on pages 3 to 14. Okay, which is item 3, I believe. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Here we go. Okay. Just a second. We have the minutes here. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting, page 4, page 5. Everybody got these minutes before them? Page 6. Anything on page 7? Also 8. 9, 10, 11 and 13. On page 13, yes.
Just to clarify, are you asking us to say these are correct, or are you asking for anything matters arising from these minutes?
I'm asking if there are any matters arising, then we'll go with other minutes correct by the members who were present. So I wasn't present, so I can't move it. Okay. Okay, can we approve these minutes by members that were present? Okay. Do we have a mover of the minutes? Okay. We will ask one more time. I know that members present were Councillor Cleverly.
Chair, I will move these minutes. Thank you. They're a true records.
Thank you. And can we have a seconder, please? Thank you. They've been duly moved and seconded. Okay, that's lovely. Okay, thank you for that. We move on to item 4 now, which is the Education Services End-of-Year Report. Education Services End-of-Year Report 21 to 22. It's great pleasure to welcome the Cabinet Member, and thank you for coming to see us this morning, and it is lovely to see you. And also the Chief Education Officer, great to see you, and the team as well. So you're very welcome here today. And we're going to go straight into the report. Chief Education Officer, do you want to speak to the report before we go through it page by page?
Chair, the Cabinet Member...
Thank you. Would you like to introduce it then, Cabinet Member? Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. It shows how long ago since I was in the full chambers speaking. I think we need to put our education report into context. This is a report that and reflects our education service post a pandemic. And I think what we actually have to look at is how well our schools have done in that context, specifically and particularly in support for the community and the focus on the community that our schools have undertaken. I'm going to read through the introduction. I'm going to go through some specific points. So I think notable achievements of this service include the opening of the Ysgol Nant Gwenthli, which is Newport's 4th Welsh medium primary school, the effective implementation of Welsh Government's EdTech programme, the implementation of the Additional Learning Needs and Educational Tribunal Wales Act, and the progress of the 21st Century Schools programme in the context of national and international supply and inflationary challenges, because there's been the other issues as well. COVID has brought with us issues in relation to supply teaching. We have seen post-COVID, post-international context, rising cost of living and the costs of fuel, and those issues are actually having a direct impact on our schools. The impact of provision to support learners in education, employment and training post-statutory schooling education remains a strongly performing aspect of local authority and schools. The recovery of school attendance levels to pre-pandemic levels, ongoing implementation of the LNET Wales Act, implementation of Curriculum Wales from September 22 and the continuation of Bambi 21st Century Schools programme are notable priorities for the financial year coming forward, moving on to this 22-23. The service continued to progress key objectives aligned to recommendations by Destin following the November 2018 and joint service inspection that took place in December 2019. Furthermore, actions to address local priorities identified through comprehensive monitoring and self-evaluation. Finally, recommendations within Estin's thematic reports, including the Curriculum for Wales, how our regional consortia and local authorities supporting schools, and we don't tell our teachers' experience of peer-on-peer sexual harassment among secondary school pupils in Wales have been proactively progressed in collaboration with the EAS and with our schools. I'm especially pleased. I appreciate the pandemic's been difficult for everyone, but there have been, as I said, already many positive and unexpected consequences given the rising cost of living crisis that we're going through. We're seeing a positive on benefit in that our schools have become community-focused with capital fund grants of £1.2 million enabling this to happen. There's been a whole school approach to well-being, and this has ensured, we've ensured that ELSA training has been undertaken within all our schools, and they've been well supported. The schools have become outward-looking, and there's recognition and support for families. And there's a growing realisation that children will only achieve and have aspiration if their lifestyles and their home circumstances are functioning. Nothing has stopped, though, because of the pandemic, and schools carried on, and provision has continued to improve for all our children. Our digital strategy group, which comprised of a number of head teachers, ensured that children in all our schools have equitable provision to digital equipment, and we're proud to say, we've best provision in the whole of Wales. The Gwent music team saw offers of secondment to Welsh Government, and this has led to the recent published National Plan for Music Education, and we know that every child in Wales will have access to a musical instrument and also lessons, and I think that's something we can be particularly proud of, because that's come from Newport. The new curriculum is progressing well, and all primary schools are now ready to implement this from the 1st of September. Our pupil referral unit and St Julian schools are now at special measures, and with Newport High and Malpas Court making excellent progress, we are certain with appropriate steps they'll be out of special measures shortly. So I think our education service in Newport has got a lot to be proud of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cabinet Member, for that introduction. We're going to go straight into the report now, and we're going to start on page 2, okay, just for clarity. And we'll move over to page 3, page 4, and we get into the body of the report on page 5. We've just had the introduction read out to us by the Cabinet Member, and so if we look at page 6, unless anybody's got any comments on page 5. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 6, in reference to the service area risks for this year. I'm pleased to note that when we looked at November's risks, ALN was red, and that's now progressed from red to amber. And just wondered, I'm looking for the report. I'm concerned it hasn't actually moved to yellow, really. I mean, I can see why it's red, but and the recommendation of the report does mention ALN a bit, but I don't either see the justification for going to amber, because I still think there's some things that need to be addressed regarding to ALN in this report.
So what's happened with ALN is locally we've put huge amounts of provision into training an ALN co in every school and head teachers, and they've also been working in cluster groups, and that's to develop capacity of their own professional knowledge and understanding around implementing the new ALN Transformation Act. However, there are many elements of ALN transformation that we're still waiting on in terms of Welsh Government, and we're waiting for that direction of travel. So a good example is we were looking at a specific set of year groups in school that were going to go through a transformation this year, and they were changed rather last minute. That didn't make a lot of difference to our schools because they had the know-how to be able to manage that effectively, and they'd already spent time talking to parents and having one-to-one sessions with parents of pupils with additional learning needs. So there's this tension, I suppose, between the fact that we are progressing hugely on the ground and developing a workforce that's really fit for purpose to manage with those transformations. We've also extended our own workforce. So, for instance, we wouldn't have had a 0 to 5 team. So by developing our 0 to 5 team, working with early years and childcare providers, what we're looking at is early intervention, prevention and identification of children before they even get into reception and nursery, so we can manage their needs more appropriately. So we've done lots of things that are really fit for purpose for the future for Newport, but yet we're still waiting on huge decisions from Welsh Government, and that's kept it in that amber zone. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions on page 6? I've got 2, I suppose. I'm glad to see that the overspend has come down. For me, it's worrying. Overspend, underspend are the same animal. Do we have any plans to utilise the underspend?
It's been a long time since education services was overspent. Okay, a long, long time. We're really critical in terms of our value for money with spend in education services. We look at every penny, and you'd expect that, wouldn't you, from all of your officers working throughout the council. The underspend that's linked to out-of-county places for young people and children. Okay, so that's underspent for a second year in the light and the background of the pandemic. So what we saw is schools that were closed for a period of time where perhaps those children that had high-end needs did not progress through the system. Okay, so they weren't identified to go into out-of-county placements. So that's one reason it was underspent. The second reason was, when I reflect upon value for money, we would do anything to avoid a child going into an out-of-county provision. It's not, if they need to have their needs met elsewhere, then of course that should happen. But where we can find local provision, where children can stay in their communities with their friendship groups and their families, where we don't need to put them onto bus journeys which are extensive and not really good for them, we will put local provision in place. And where we can find local provision, it can often be better value for money and better for children. And so in this instance, what we've found is we've spent more on local provision, setting up specific groups to manage complex needs where children are well and they're thriving, rather than sending them to out-of-county placements, which can be in the region of £80,000 per year for some children. So we've done it with best intentions. So I don't feel uncomfortable with that underspend at all. I think that it's been best for the residents and the children of Newport, and actually that's got into the wider council underspend to be used for alternative things.
Thank you for that, Chief Education Officer. So I'm moving away from this. Yes, you've answered the question at the end. Don't disagree with anything you said in the preamble. Out of city placements are enormously expensive per child. 80,000 is a very conservative estimate. These rates are going higher. We all agree that keeping children within easy access of their families, keeping those relationships are there. Thank you. At the very end of that...
Chair, I thought I raised my hand in there. Can you see it?
Just a second. You'll be brought in now. You'll be brought in now, Councillor Al-Uami. Please.
Thank you, Chair.
Please go. Please, no, you won't. You're not coming in just yet. Contain your enthusiasm for 2 minutes. So you've identified where the underspend is going, and that's back into the general. And thank you for that answer. The second part on that page then is the matrix grid. I sort of feel it's been squashed in here a bit. Maybe going forward, maybe this is just a technical issue. We could maybe have a better presentation of that, because it's slightly confusing for me anyway, and I don't know how other members are. But that's fine. So you don't have to respond to that. I guess the staff will pick that up. Councillor Al-Uami.
Chair, it's Al-Nuaimi actually. I did not see it actually on page 6. I did not see there is an underspend necessarily, because if you take the whole year, I think it's almost even, isn't it? Chief Education Officer?
There is indeed an underspend at the end of the year. What I can say is when we're budget monitoring throughout the year, we do that on a monthly basis, and we identified the forecast underspend month on month. It wasn't a surprise, and at various points in the year, we were able to say, within education, we can see that money's not needed, and that can be put back into the corporate pot, the wider council pot, to be used for something which might be needed.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm only commenting on the graphs on page 6. Yeah?
Yeah, so the budget was 15.6 million. The out-term position, the spend was 14.9. So there was around an £800,000 underspend. It certainly was an underspend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I will try and get your name right next time. Okay, 6 on page 7. Any member on page 7? Is that a hand up?
I think Councillor Elmer-Amy used the hands up function at the top of the screen rather than in the chat box as we usually do. That's the difference.
Thank you, Councillor. Maybe you could take that down, I think, now, as you're causing confusion. Thank you. Okay, page 7. Anything on page 8? Page 9? Anything on page 9? Okay.
Chair, I raised my hand on page 8.
Okay, no problem. We'll go back to page 8. Yes, continue, Councillor.
Can I speak? 21st century schools for Basilisk. Can we have an update on that, please? How long will it take to be finished?
It'll be about another 18 months, but actually everything's on track with Basilisk, so there's no concerns. We meet as a project board on a monthly basis. We're pleased with progress and meeting all deadlines.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor. Page 9, again on 21st century. The project is supported improvements to the Council's overall management by replacing poor quality and demountable classrooms with a new accommodation. The project has recommended the following discussions with Welsh Government about the overall programme, and design team meetings are scheduled to take place early in the summer. I noticed that could you just explain to me why there has been no movement on these figures, and going forward, what are we to expect?
There's no deep explanation, Chair. The build, we go through a design process, you go through feasibility studies. The feasibility studies have been completed. We've been looking at background issues such as when a school operates as a building site, what do you need to put into place to ensure that there's enough space for pupils, given that some buildings might have to be demolished or have major works done. So the initial stages of the feasibility and the planning are hugely significant and quite in-depth, but there is no slowness of approach.
Okay, thank you. And when we go down to the next two ones, which is 21st Centuries, Whiteheads, and the Welsh Medium School there, I see that they have been put back and delayed. Can you explain going forward what the impact that's going to have on the communities that support these schools, that need these schools going forward?
Certainly, Chair. So the first thing I should point out is that the delays with Whiteheads was around the transfer of land from Welsh Government, so it wasn't a local issue that we had any way of changing. So those were the cards we were dealt on that occasion. However, we did do a SWOT analysis to consider the risks of Pilgwentley not moving into Whiteheads. And there aren't any risks there with the school because naturally Pilgwentley is in a really good school where the building is sound, and the head teacher and the senior management team are supporting us with the development and design of the new school. What we were concerned about in the first instance was the delay in Nant Gwedley, the new Welsh medium primary school, which is currently based in the old Lodge primary building in Cullion, which is a seedling school, and that would be waiting then to move into Pilgwentley, okay, ultimately. Now, what we do know is there are enough places to be able to support a further year or 18 months, even 2 years within the Lodge primary setting. Okay, so there aren't any risks to not having enough places in the 4th Welsh Medium School. However, what we do note is it's important that parents that are considering putting their children in those Welsh Medium primary places, that can put them off somewhat if they're being transported to Cullion in the first instance, and ultimately their final destination will be in Pilgwentley. And we're trying to stimulate the demand for Welsh medium education, and that's not always helpful to have a school in a temporary site. However, we are still supporting transport costs where parents and their children are eligible.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's the last one on page 9 and goes into page 10. Why is it not applicable anymore? Because at the end of the day, it says it's service across the city, although it is acknowledged that it will take some time to fully resolve. So what is the issue there in regards to the safe walking routes into schools?
Councillor Watkins, it's not that it's not applicable and not absolutely valid, it's that our service area is not the primary lead here. So what we've done is we've effectively worked with city services to build up an active travel plan with expectations, but they will take over the future planning and provision for this specific project. So it's still vitally important. We can continue to communicate our expectation and our aspiration around active travel with our head teacher colleagues and with our schools and through a healthy school scheme, but another service area will be the lead.
So who actually monitors this safe route to school?
On an officer level, that will be the active travel officer who sits within city services, which is led, of course, by Stephen Jarrett's service.
So will that come back to this scrutiny committee?
No, Councillor Watkins, it won't. It will be evident. That's something that members might wish to look for in city services' future service plan, and so that it can be monitored through scrutiny.
Thank you. No more questions, and I take it on page 9. Page 9. Page 10. Any questions on page 10? I have one on the ALL transformation. Following the Welsh Government's release of A&L implementation guidance, head teachers, I'm just trying to think why I have this highlighted here. Additional inclusion officers have been appointed to support the development of inclusive practices and systems. No, you're okay. I have no question on that. Thank you. I have the answer. Page 11. Thank you, Councillor Druitt.
Sorry for speaking from behind you, Sarah. I really welcome the Gwent Music Service providing music education for 124 out of 161 schools in the region and 41 of those in Newport. How is it planned that Gwent Music Service will implement access to free musical instruments and free music education for all pupils, which is promised by Welsh Government?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Druitt. I'm going to pass over now to Karen Keane, who sat next to you, and Karen is the Assistant Head of Education for Engagement and Learning, and within Karen's portfolio, she leads Gwent Music, so she'll be able to give you a really specific answer.
Thank you. I'm pleased to say that Welsh Government has funded over £600,000 for Gwent Music to invest in instruments that can be available to all learners across the city. And in identifying the musical instruments that the service purchased, they have sought feedback from schools and from young people about the types of musical instruments that would not only suit the curriculum, but suit young people's interests as well. Because I think what we didn't want to do is spend £600,000 on a single type of instrument. We wanted to have that full variety. Gwent Music are also working with schools on plans to deliver lessons to all learners in Year 3, and again that's been funded by Welsh Government, so that will be the start of our work to ensure that all young people can access music provision. And I can say that in an update to the information that is on the report in front of you, that Gwent Music continue to gain more and more schools working with them on almost a daily basis, and the service has tried its best to adapt the type of provision so that it is delivering much more whole class and curriculum type activities, so again working with more young people, and not only with those elite musicians, but musicians who are learning to play an instrument or learning to sing for the first time. So a lot of really positive work going on there.
Thank you very much for a very positive answer.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's on top of page 11, identifying staffing need and secure funding for additional posts. In the beginning, a statement was made in regards to the staffing. In total, you've got 14 new staff within the department. I'm concerned of what training has been given to those, and also on the subject of ALN needs, what sort of training in regards to the 6 new inclusion enrichment team have been given for the...
Councillor Watkins, I'm going to pass over now to our Assistant Head of Education for Inclusion that leads that team, and Katie Rees will be able to give you a very specific answer.
Hi. Can you hear me? Sorry. The 6 new ALN staff are highly trained anyway. That's why we selected them. The 2 teacher advisors were highly experienced ALNCOs within our Newport schools, so aware of all our systems, have access to all our training, and then we've supported them in becoming a local authority officer and modelled, and we've linked them up with our other teacher advisor and curriculum improvement advisor to develop that type of skill of advising schools. And they're doing extremely well. The other officers as well all had education backgrounds and came from either our schools or our providers, highly experienced with ALN. So we're building the teams now around them. So for the HLTA, for example, has joined our early years team and is modelling and coaching non-maintained settings in good ALN practice and working closely with our early years teacher advisor. With our SEN officers, we've got a team of 10 now, because obviously with the statements changing to IDPs, there's a massive piece of work to do there to transfer those information across. And what we've got is leads on each area. So we've got a lead for early years now, a lead for post-16, and then a lead for CLAR pupils as well. So we're developing the capacity within the team, sharing good practice, but they are actually highly skilled staff that we've appointed, and we're developing now new systems for ALN implementation.
Thank you, Chair. A supplementary question, if I may. What further training are these new members of staff going to get? And do you foresee any difficulties within the near future?
Katie, can I come in there? Is that okay? Councillor Watkins, across our service area, obviously we're education services and we're deeply committed to professional learning, and our officers are really go through, we have high expectations in terms of middle leaders and senior leaders supervising their staff accordingly. And so you'll see that we'll have regular supervision sessions and check-ins that happen at least once a month in our service area. We have clear performance management targets, and we have opportunities during each of these sessions to talk about professional learning needs. And that can come from the officer themselves as a request, or it can come from their supervisor or leader to give some suggestions about how they might like to professionally develop. And as a service area, we're also considering the needs of all of our officers within the service area. So we've got extensive professional learning programmes that are being planned and have happened, but we think that this is really important because education services, particularly the staff that are in outreach positions with schools, need to have high credibility. They need to be reliable in order to, and they need to be value for money themselves. So this is a really important aspect of our work. And each of us, as senior leaders, has a professional learning plan to take our teams forward. So you can imagine that educational psychology has a bespoke plan which is slightly different from the SEN team. But we give huge consideration to that, and we've had great successes. So we evaluate our professional learning, and we're always looking for those next steps. So I'm glad that you touched upon that, because it's something that we hold very dear to our hearts.
Thank you, Chair. Anything else on page 11? Page 12? Page 13? Yes, Councillor.
I refer to the section about pupil deprivation grant with regard to looked after children. And you note that schools have 15% of Q4 action completed, and it seems that progress is being made. How is the pupil deprivation grant spent in terms of behavioural interventions, tuition and looked after children mentors, and specifically what is the tiered approach to interventions mentioned, and how successful will that shaping be?
Before you answer that question, thank you. I'm trying to get these mics right today. What page are you referring your question to, Pat? You're on page 13. That's okay, thank you.
The Looked After Children's Coordinator, Councillor Druitt, is a shared post between education and children's services. That works really well, clearly, and this is a new approach to working with looked after children, and it's based on evidence-based research of what works. So we were keen to, again, considering that value for money aspect, okay, that I keep talking about, it's really important to us. We wanted to make sure that the planned action for looked after children around their well-being and their behaviour was something that was evidence-based and had a high probability of working. So we're also linking with the EAS, and they are supporting schools with professional learning again around these evidence-based approaches. And there's 3 approaches. Sarah, can you help out here as well? This is Sarah Davis, who's our Assistant Head of Engagement and Learning, and holds the portfolio of the link between looked after children and education services.
Good morning. Just to say that the work we're doing, we're launching a pilot for this round, because PDG allocation's only recently come out in the last week or so. So we're piloting an approach, a tiered approach. So there will be a universal provision that will be offered through the EAS and through our CLARs and LAs to our schools, and every school will have a universal provision.
in terms of supporting their CLAR learners. The second tier is the targeted support, which is the new element in a sense, because we're looking to invite schools to use their cluster PDG grants to create the role of a cluster mentor or coach. And that cluster or mentor or coach will be supported with trauma-informed practice and training via the local authority and AT's team, through the education psychologist, with the head teachers in that secondary school initially, as then we'll cascade down, to create a trauma-informed school and trauma-informed practice, particularly around those CLAR learners. In addition, the additional capacity that Nick Davis and her team of social services have created with their LAC mentors and CLAR support teachers, they will all intertwine. So there will be a cluster mentor, this is the vision for the pilot, there will be a cluster mentor who will know every CLAR learner in the cluster and will make weekly contact with those CLAR learners right through the cluster schools. They will then attend any meetings in relation to that child and be part of any documentation reviews in partnership with social services and the CLAR leads. And then the very top would be the bespoke work, which would be refining that. But we've got to get the middle tier right first, which is working on now, with the aspiration then that all our schools in Newport will become trauma-informed. All our clusters in Newport will have a CLAR coach that will work seamlessly throughout the system, from social services right through and across all services. So that's our vision, and we're launching a pilot that schools are invited to participate, and we're shaping that pilot now and those cluster PDG grants to facilitate that work.
Thank you very much indeed, and especially for the answer, because it covers my question, so great. Okay, page 14.
Yes, please, Chair.
Councillor McDad, please speak.
Yeah, it's action 3. In terms of the action, I note it is completed, but my question is on the effectiveness of it. So it's quite laudable that the professional learning for chairs and vice chairs of governors of secondary schools focusing on improving the quality of leadership and teaching and learning, particularly when it comes then to pupils, EAL, and also children of military service, parents, carers. What I'd like to ask really is, do we have any measure of the effectiveness then of that action in terms of, has it been taken up by the chairs and vice chairs? Have they attended? Do we know if any subsequent actions have happened, you know, to improve the experience and the learning, the teaching, learning for EAL and the children of military carers, etc.?
Councillor, it's very difficult to judge the impact of this action, and actually it's something that we just continue to keep on the agenda. Turnout for this particular aspect of our governor's work has been poor, and there have been times where there have been just 3 or 4 governors that have attended. So whilst we work on our communication, we continue to advertise, we continue to work with chairs of governors to try and get other members of the governing body to participate. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because actually governors are in a voluntary position. Much of their time is taken up with governing body meetings and subcommittees. So we can but continue to try to get governors to engage, and we, as I said, we do not take this off the agenda, but it is very difficult to determine the impact of both the training and the impact based on low numbers and future issues that might come out of a governing body. But I don't think that should stop us from putting the professional learning on in the first instance.
Yeah. Can I come? Yeah, can I come back, please? Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I mean, a candid answer, and to be honest with you, is what I suspected. But from the point of view of us scrutinising the work here, it looks like an action. You've completed it. It's a green. Sort of, it almost gives the impression that it's really worked. But what we hear is that, you've tried hard. It's not your fault. And then governors of schools are also pushed hard on many fronts. It just really, it's useful for us to know really that some actions we might have the best of will really to try and get them to do these changes, but they're not happening. So how do we then help the children really? How do we help those children to narrow the gap of attainment?
I mean, that's a particular action that hasn't got an impact to go with it, that we can't track that impact, but there are many actions linked to equity and to supporting more vulnerable learners that do have it linked to them. Okay, so there are a range of other actions. So that might be linked to... there's another example is looking at PDG spend around vulnerable learners and schools tracking what they've spent that on in a meaningful way, and they're looking at whether they've narrowed the gap between those pupils that are disadvantaged and not disadvantaged. That's one way of tracking impact back within a school. So that's a good example of one that has got impact. This particular one hasn't. There are, I think, as a theme, when you look at professional learning, it is very difficult to track back impact. At least when you're focusing on a small group of officers, for instance, within our service area, you can track some impact around how they're developing. There are signs of improvements within their work. When you're working with, we've got such a huge cohort of governors, that's really, really difficult. 57 schools, each governing body has got at least 10 governing body members. That's hard. So I accept that some actions will have robust impact lines that you can draw, while others won't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real problem, isn't it? But we still have the children who need the help, really.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that the answer is to make sure that we've got a range of actions. So, for instance, a governor's professional learning session is the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many actions around supporting EAL learners, for instance, or disadvantaged learners, whichever vulnerable group that they might be from, where there might be 50 actions linked to the local authority and that individual school. And it's the dimensions of actions and their impact that make the difference. It's not just one action alone. Yeah. Is that helpful at all?
Well, I mean, just recognising, the situation. Thank you.
I think Councillor raised a very good question. I suppose, and the answer was honest. We'd expect nothing else. But going forward, whatever measurement we use going forward, because we don't know quite yet, it does look like it's been completed, and yet it's an imperfect completion. Is there any way of reflecting, going forward, the true situation? I mean, you don't have to answer that now. Just bear that in mind, because we're going forward now with this programme. It's a little bit confusing when it says it's complete, and yet we know it's an imperfect situation.
It's just a very complex situation, isn't it? If you were looking at governor self-evaluation, that's another measure, isn't it, as whether a governing body thinks they're effective in terms of their practice, but that is linked to individual schools. I don't think that you can get a perfect answer, Councillor Oakley. I think that I understand why you're raising that issue.
That's okay. Well, listen, I think we're on the same page, so thank you. Okay, page, anything else on page 14? Okay, nothing. Page 15. Page 16.
Sorry, Chair, can I just go to page 15? Chair? Oh.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor, unless you raise your hand, I'm not going to be able to see you.
Well,
I can hear you, but I can't always see that you wish to come in unless you raise your hand.
Yeah,
That's
Chair,
okay.
I will use the raise hand facility. I'm happy to do that, but last time I think you overlooked it. Can I just? It's just really on page 15 on action number 4. It really sort of relates to the previous discussion we've just had, and I'm pleased to note really that we are trying to deal with improving the position of children, especially those on FSM and so on. I just wondered really whether we do have any kind of data on what the action has been completed in March 2022. On any data to show really what has been achieved then by the completion of that action.
There are indicators linked to this. So, for instance, the action is to support schools to ensure that curriculum pathways provide appropriate choice for all learners pre and post 16. What we do know is that the learner measure has been met. So the learner measure, for instance, for post 16 says that a specific range of subjects has to be put in place for learner choice, and that has been achieved. So it's a yes or no answer. Karen, Sarah, is it 32 subject areas for post-16? Yeah. So 32 subject areas in collaboration with secondary schools have been put into place. So that's very easy to track in terms of its impact. The other aspect is we also have information which demonstrates that which specific subject areas, for instance at post-16, demonstrate good value for money from moving from GCSE to post-16. So how extra value added is measured. That information is not shared in the public domain. Okay, that is linked to, that's internal data. What I can tell you though is that there is strength in that data that schools at post-16, for instance, are adding value within their post-16 qualifications from when their learners started at GCSE. So there is a range of internal accountability measures that schools own, that we can be assured that we know schools are making a difference. So I know for all of those actions, there is a definitive answer, there is impact there. So quite different to the last question, which was linked to professional learning and governors, which we are unable to measure.
Right. Yeah, I'm assured by your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Page 16. Page 17.
Chair.
Councillor Druitt.
I refer to the work of the education welfare officers in schools, and I welcome the success of the strategy to reduce the rates of persistent absenteeism, and note that an additional education welfare officer has been put in post. What has been the impact of this appointment in reducing the rates of persistent absenteeism?
I'm going to pass that over to Karen, who's leading on attendance at the moment. Thank you, Karen.
I'm able to answer that question for you. Indeed, I can say that the appointment of additional officers has meant that schools are receiving more support than previously. And schools will refer young people and families to the Education Welfare Service for follow-up, and the education welfare officers are then able to provide that bespoke support for individual families to work with them on what are the barriers to the children attending school. And that is something that takes time. It's not something that can be done in one home visit to a family. It often involves signposting to other services in other areas. But that work is beginning to reduce the number of persistent absentees and beginning to increase overall attendance. So we can already see the impact of our work. If we have monthly attendance data that we share with all schools. Again, it's not data that is in the public domain, but that data highlights where schools are making good progress in the work with families and the Education Welfare Service to reduce the number of persistent absentees. What I will say is that we've also funded some family liaison officers, and those posts are proving to be effective as well. The difference between a family liaison officer and an education welfare officer is that the family liaison officer doesn't have the statutory duties in relation to court or legal aspects of the role, and the family liaison officers are doing more close work with parents, really focusing on parenting skills and providing confidence, accompanying parents to meetings, taking children to school along with parents. So again, that's having a positive impact. And we are beginning to see rates of attendance improve. We still have a long way to go. Right? And I don't want you to feel that we are where we want to be, back to attendance rates pre-COVID, but there is definite improvement. Impact is good.
Thank you.
Councillor Watkins.
A comment on one and a question on another, if I may, please. Item 2, it's glad to see that the extra EWO has been appointed, because at this committee, at the last term, were concerned when NCC reduced the EWOs at that time. So I'm glad to see they've been reinstated, and it would be nice to see the absenteeism reduce. The other question is, what media in item 3, what media campaign is used by schools across the city? And you've got one here where it says the action commentary, rates of COVID-19 continue to affect the day-to-day operations of schools. This has resulted in a further delay to the attendance campaign. So could you elaborate on that campaign as well, please? Thank you.
We designed, in conjunction with the media team, an attendance campaign that was about reassuring parents about that schools are safe places and for their children to attend. That campaign took a number of different forms. You may have seen the banners outside the primary schools in particular, where we've had the large banners, posters, correspondence to parents, social media posts. But secondary schools have still faced a number of challenges as a result of COVID-related absences, right up until the end of the spring term, and some are still experiencing challenges at the moment. So we felt that we needed to have greater guidance from Welsh Government about what we could do and what we couldn't do before we moved ahead with the attendance campaign. Now, the campaign is ready to go, and we have decided to make sure that that campaign starts prior to the autumn term, so in the summer holiday period. And that parts of that campaign will also focus on ensuring that parents are now aware that fixed penalty notices can be used for non-attendance at school. And so it's making sure that there is that awareness that in the most extreme cases, that schools are able to make use of fixed penalty notices should a young person not be attending school. So that attendance campaign is ready for the start of the autumn term.
One further question, if I may, Chair. during the COVID, it wasn't required to give attendance figures. Are they going to be recommenced? And if so, when, please?
At present, there is still no requirement on schools to share or publish their attendance data. There is still no requirement for schools to set attendance targets. And we've had no indication from Welsh Government about when that position is going to change.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, page 17. And page 18. Page 19. 20. 21. Anyone on page 21? I have a question then. On items 3 and 4. The first one is relating to item 3, the implementation of the new National Safeguarding Toolkit for Schools. The question is, I see that the figures have stagnated. We're showing no signs of up, no signs of down. Can I have an explanation as to why that is, please?
Absolutely. This was a new auditing scrutiny committee. Every school has to complete a statutory safeguarding audit every academic year. They were completed in full. 100% of schools completed safeguarding audits. This is a new tool that was introduced in autumn term, and in the background, the context was, of course, that COVID was rising and rising on a daily basis, and that went right the way through until Easter, or at least February half term, and now we see ourselves back in the position where COVID is hugely affecting the education workforce. So at that time, it was introduced because it was important to bring that new practice into our schools, but we also had to have an understanding that with some schools operating, with 25 less staff on a daily basis, and they were struggling to keep schools open, or there were specific class closures, that there had to be some give and take. So we didn't delay the sharing of that work and trying to have higher expectations of new practice, but we had to have a level of understanding that not everything could be possibly done at that stage. Now, the way that we operate safeguarding work is within clusters. So clusters come together, so they're working in close proximity. They often share similar experiences of their community contexts. You can imagine St Julian's cluster working together, the Bayside cluster, etc. And it gives the opportunity for face-to-face interaction or Teams interaction, talking all about safeguarding on lots of different levels. So great that happens on a half-termly basis with our education safeguarding leads and head teachers or designated safeguarding leads. It will continue to be drip-fed through schools and will be refined and embedded over the course of this year and next year. When you introduce something, you really get 100% completion. But it's not to say that safeguarding practices and those statutory audits haven't been completed. So our schools are not in an unsafe position.
Sorry. Have you finished? Did you finish before we sort of interrupted? There was something going on that we got distracted by. But thank you for the answer. So I guess going forward, without knowing what going forward is going to be quite like, we can see that there will be an improvement on the stats here. Thank you for that. Another one on item 4, which is Another one on item 4. Just a brief explanation. I see, according to the stats, we've gone back 1%. Could I have a very simple explanation or regarding that? We've gone from 98 to 97%.
I would assume that would be linked to just the fact that staff, there's a consistent new starters as part of any organisation. So you could, if we were looking at the 98%, which would have been in Q2, we could have had a new starter that hadn't quite met the threshold for safeguarding training, and that's how it's been brought down. So it's just the volume of staff changes across each quarter.
Any other questions on that page 21? Yes, Councillor Scrutiny. By all means we can, and we can stop at this point for a comfort break. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome back. We just had to adjourn for a few moments and we're back. So we're going to continue where we left off, and we're on page 22. Thank you, Councillor.
Hello. It was just on point number 7. It was just an update, really. I was just wondering if you'd managed to employ a second educational psychiatrist.
Yes, we were able to, and she started in September. We're also going out for advert for an additional educational psychologist. So, however, there is a national shortage, and it did take us a long time to recruit the 2 EPs that we'd have. So,
okay, so Jenkins, what we're also looking at, as Katie described, having an advert out for an extra EP. We're looking for a Welsh-speaking educational psychologist, so we're going to leave that out as an open advert until we recruit, so that we've got a Welsh medium speaker to be able to work in our Welsh medium schools, really. And as I say, with the national shortage, it's just important that we continue to try and recruit wherever we can. We've even got to the point where we had somebody that was leaving university, completing their educational psychology course this summer, that we'd given them a provisional post, really, before they'd even finished, on the basis that they did complete and were successful in their course. But their educational psychologists are really hard to come by at the moment. So we're trying to make Newport obviously as inviting as possible to work in, and we've also restructured our psychology team slightly, so there's more career progression to allow them to be able to progress and be more successful in their careers. And that's helpful, isn't it, Katie?
yes, we've put an additional senior educational psychologist in post as well, so that we've got that depth now of experience and range, because obviously our team has expanded considerably over the last 2 years, so we needed that level structure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Page 23, page 22. So, yes, Councillor.
Sorry, is there what the reasoning for the national shortage in that? Reasoning for the shortage nationally, is it a new role, or people leaving that role for other positions?
Our perception is that there's not enough places in the universities on the courses to meet the workforce demands across Wales. So what we've been talking about, we linked to a Welsh Government group for ALN. So Katie's the representative for Newport, and she meets with other heads of ALN across Wales, and with the School Standards Division from Welsh Government, who can then, with that feedback, influence universities to increase the number of places for educational psychologists, to then meet our workforce demands, because it's becoming really frustrating. You know, where we've got the funding and we've got the need for it with our schools and with our children, and you know, we need educational psychologists right from the from 0 up to 25 years with new ALN transformation. So the need is greater than ever, but we can't. Yeah. So Welsh Government are doing that on our behalf, particularly with obviously Welsh universities, but it's difficult then to work with English universities. And what Welsh Government have done for us, where we've had issues with specific aspects of our educational workforce, so for instance, Welsh language speakers, they've put into place a workforce plan around that specific section of the workforce. We've just seen an education workforce plan for the next 10 years for Welsh-speaking teaching staff. So we're hoping to, within our meetings, to feed back to Welsh Government so that they consider a similar approach for educational psychology, because the need is always going to be there.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Pym. We're desperately trying to hear you. I know we have issues with these. Well, I understand that, but we really want to try and hear your line of questioning. It's important that we understand that, and it's important that everybody, even those maybe 5 people at home watching this live stream, actually hear. So we'll have to try and find a way around it. That's okay. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. There's no blame attached here. Okay, and thank you for the question. Any more on page 22? 23? 24? 25? 26, 27, 28. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, action point 8. It says
Councillor, some of those issues have been slow to... It's linked to a specific accessibility issue. So, for instance, one school is having hearing loops put in, but that job is held up by the rest of the building work which needs to be completed. So that means the accessibility strategy aspect is later than anticipated. In phase 1, there are 5 jobs that need to be completed. 3 of those will be completed by the end of summer term. So, for instance, I can think of some ramps that need to be put in specific schools, and those jobs are completely lined up. They can't be done until school is shut, so that it's a safe working environment, but it's all on track to be finished by August the 31st. So that's good news. We've also put some jobs out to tender. They've been slow in coming back for phase 2. So the funding is there. We're trying to track it in a meaningful way, but the tenders are not coming through, because I think what we've got is quite a flooded labour market in terms of building work and minor works. So we're working with our colleagues in Norse to try and get some good tenders back. They've got to be value for money at the end of the day. So what we wouldn't want to do is just accept a really high cost just because this is the only building firm that could be contracted in at this present moment in time. So we've always got our mind and our eye on the value for money aspect. So it's frustrating. What we continue to do as well, we've got a governance board that meets around all capital and maintenance issues, and the accessibility work is part of that as well, but not forgetting as well as we also know that there are children behind this that need that provision in place in order to access places. So what we've been good at, I think, is forecasting those pupils coming through from an early years perspective, so that if the job does end up being quite late, that doesn't stop that pupil accessing that school place. So it's trying to think well ahead of the game.
Yeah, thank you for that inclusive answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, still on 28. Anyone else? Page 29. Page 30. Page 31. Page 32.
Chair, I'd like to get an interest in page 32 on item 20. Governors. Thank you.
Thank you, that's been noted. On page 20, on page 32, I was going back in time then, page 32, on item, I'm trying to think, there is 22, on item 21 on page 32, can you give us an update, please, on, there's been no progress on this over the spring term, but it's anticipated that they will be revisited during the forthcoming summer months. Are we on plan? The update, please.
But what I can say is that there is continuous investigations into what is achievable in expanding Tredegar Park, in light of the fact that during our feasibility studies we have noted that there are floodplains in existence which have prevented us from doing the work that we wanted to carry out, but we're trying to seek alternative solutions, but I have no further details of that at present.
Okay, we'll note that going forward, and I guess we will revisit this. Okay, thank you. Anyone else on page 32? Page 33 and 34, 35. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. So item number 1, we're referring about the ALN for Welsh language speakers, and you're saying that it's going to the Bridge Achievement Centre. Is there Welsh language provision at the Bridge Achievement Centre?
There has been at times where we've needed to meet the bespoke needs of that pupil, so that's absolutely happened, Katie, hasn't it? But it's always really useful to have a Welsh medium speaker anywhere across the establishment, you can imagine. It's worth its weight in gold. When we consider, is it an essential requirement of the Bridge Achievement Centre as a pupil referral unit, we've had limited Welsh-speaking children that have gone into that environment. And it's happened once, Katie, is that right?
Yes, it's happened once. Sorry. We do have 2 Welsh speakers there, the deputy head and one of the TLR holders, and the Welsh head teachers have said they prefer to have Welsh outreach at the moment to try and maintain the young person in the Welsh medium school. So that's what we're trying to develop. Obviously it's a new secondary school as well, so we're also developing ALN provision with them and their own systems. So we're trying to train staff, build capacity there. But when we have had young people come out, for example, we've paid then for support for that young person. We've given them the option of Welsh medium TAs if we can recruit, because obviously the recruitment issue as well. But the support is given where possible. But the idea is to try to maintain placement within the mainstream Welsh school and put the support in there.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And saying to the officers presenting, thank you for answering the questions, but we desperately like to try and hear and capture what you have to say. And I understand that I'm watching the difficulty that we have with our microphones today, but I get the gist of what you're saying and I understand it, so thank you. Okay, page... anything else on page 35?
Chair?
Yes. Yes, Councillor.
Trying to put my... Yeah.
Okay.
I did raise my hand, Chair. So, okay. I am finding it difficult on page 35, action 2. Can I just ask, please, what is the risk of what is called a managed move? What is the managed move risk? Because if you read that, effective arrangements are in place for managed moves in the Welsh sector for pupils at risk of managed moves. So it's a little bit convoluted. So can I ask for explanation as to what the risk is?
It goes back to the distance between the schools. So if you think about Manage Move operates for those within our secondary. We've got 9 secondary schools in Newport, 8 are Welsh English medium. And between them, if there is a pupil at risk of exclusion, they can go to other schools for a fresh start or for a period of time while they consider and they behaviour and have some one-to-one support in another school. With the Welsh medium schools, obviously the nearest schools are going to be Plasmawr in Cardiff, the Welsh medium school in Caerphilly. So distance is an issue. So just the transport of a pupil being on a bus, in heavy traffic in the morning for an hour is significant. And, with a pupil being... perhaps their well-being not being great at that particular time. That's an additional concern. There's also the links between the schools as well, and making sure that the school with the outgoing pupil on a managed move to another Welsh medium school is there's liaison between the two schools. And sometimes the distance doesn't always help that. So the distance between those Welsh medium secondary schools doesn't lend itself well in the same way that the English medium schools have got that short distance. They're meeting on a regular basis. They meet every Wednesday morning. That's the complexity, really.
So basically, we're saying we only have one secondary Welsh medium school in Newport. So any move would have to be across authority, yeah?
It would, depending upon parents' wishes. Some parents might... Ultimately, we want to be able to provide the same Welsh language equity. So if you go from one school to a managed move, then you should theoretically go to another Welsh medium school. Some parents feel that they're happy under the circumstance of being in a very difficult and challenging time with their child, that they would be happy for them to have a different type of start in an English medium school, but that is a parent's preference. The local authority has the responsibility and accountability to make sure that a managed move is operated Welsh medium to Welsh medium.
Okay. So I mean, do you have a feel to the numbers we have had? Have we had many or from a Welsh medium, and whether we went then to an English medium?
The numbers are not significant, are they, Katie? And actually that's why we put the outreach in place with the Bridge Achievement Centre, with those Welsh language experts to go in and try and support. The numbers are very few and far between, but we are ultimately trying to make all of our aspects of our education system equitable in terms of Welsh language. So if the need arises, we've got to continue to work on this area and make those links available. Katie, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, numbers are very low, and at the moment, because it's a growing school, Ysgol Gwent Ysgoed, we need to work on the provisions within the school and develop their sustainability and the capability to maintain the placements of ALN youngsters. So that's our main focus. We have, however, had one young person who'd moved to Cardiff. We'd moved a manager moved to a Cardiff Welsh medium school. The parents wanted to maintain Welsh, but realised the young person needed a fresh start. So what we're looking at is bespoke plans for individual young people, rather than have a web of management with all of the Welsh schools in the region. We just target bespoke plans for the individuals. But yeah, it's about capacity building, working with the Welsh schools to look at the support. We've also got autism outreach from Ysgol Brynderw in the medium of Welsh, and also from the Bridge Achievement Centre. So we're using that to maintain placements within mainstream.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor, for your question. Page 36. Okay, I have one on page 36 on item 1. Future. Okay, what are we doing going forward to the future with regards to ensuring that we're keeping schools who are falling into deficit, keeping them on track? I mean, in the future now, going forward, what plans do we have?
Okay, this would cover items 1, 2 and the amber measure that are here. Okay, so just some things that are really useful to note. There will be no schools at present that are forecast to be in deficit this financial year. Okay, so helpfully, what we know is that Cabinet made a decision to maintain all cost pressures related to school for the 3rd year on the trot, which is helping schools not obviously maintain their budgets. There's also an aspect as well where Welsh Government did provide a large amount of grants at the end of the academic year. Okay, and many schools find themselves in a large surplus position. But we note that that can give a false impression itself. Okay, and there's 2 aspects to this line of inquiry with schools and their surplus budgets. First of all, a school can have a surplus budget, but it can also have an in-year deficit. So theoretically, if they continue to overspend, their surplus budget would run dry, and that's a risk for the council. Okay, so Cabinet made the decision 2 financial years ago to put into place a leader to work with schools' finance to make sure that they were keeping a really close eye on schools' deficit budgets, and that's largely worked. So we've tracked now which schools are overspending on a recurrent basis, and based on their surplus positions, at what point would they need to take appropriate action for them not to be in a deficit position overall. So there's great foresight and planning which occurs so that nobody gets themselves into that position in the first place. So that's provided both challenge and support to head teachers and governing bodies linked to potential deficit situations. We're also looking at the surplus positions and making sure that schools have appropriate spending plans in place to show that they're spending public money with good value for money in mind. Okay, so rather than just have a huge surplus budget, what are the spending plans associated with that? Now, we could have categorised that work, in effect, as green, but at the end of Q4, further grants dropped into the system to provide, which meant that there was greater surplus positions in schools, and we didn't have at that point the spending plans to see what schools were doing with that surplus position, and in fact staffing structures change over time. And that means that some schools, again, could be overspending over a period of time, which could lead to a deficit budget. So we see this now as a cyclical process. You never get, I don't think, to a point where you are ultimately green. The processes and methodologies have been refined to prevent that risk as best as it possibly can be. But we did find ourselves in a position where we had all of the information and the understanding of where schools were, and now we have to complete that again, based on their new financial positions. The other part of this as well is the risks associated with, we see schools with large surplus positions. We also have to take into account there are some COVID mitigations that are still in place. So for instance, staff that are 26 weeks plus pregnant would be starting their maternity leave very, very early, whereas some individuals would choose to start their maternity leave, you know, right at, 40 weeks. So a school has to pay currently for those additional 14 weeks. And that can be quite a lot of money for a school. If you think, you know, you could have potentially 10 staff in a large secondary school that are going through that. Schools are also picking up COVID sickness, where previously that was paid for by the COVID Welsh Government Fund. So whilst budgets can look healthy, we have to make sure that we're keeping a consistent eye on school spend. So that relates to the amber position we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Councillor Watkins, then Councillor Townsend, then Councillor Cleverly, in that order, please. Thank you. And then Councillor Spring. Councillor Pym.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's nice to hear that no schools are in deficit. Excellent. And I am concerned about grants which are coming in last at the end of the financial year. This happens every year and it just skews all the budgets of the schools. The other thing is, the comment or the answer which you gave earlier in regards to Newport North, schools are still having difficulty getting Newport North to give quotes and do work. And obviously this is the reason why quite a few of them have got underspends, which are over the regulation percentage, shall we say. I know, as Chair of Governors of one of the schools, then I am totally aware of exactly what is happening, but there doesn't seem to be any support for those schools that got that type of thing. And I will more than likely take it up with somebody that's involved with Newport North to find out what exactly they're actually doing. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Townsend. Councillor Townsend, can you turn your mic on, please?
Yes. Are there any nurseries in deficit? I know, it's good that the schools are not, but are there any nurseries? And just to follow on from what Councillor Watkins said, Newport North is a shambles where the nursery that I'm a governor on is concerned. They're waiting for endless repairs to be done, and they're just not being done, and some of the repairs that they've done are defective. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Townsend, so no, there aren't any nurseries with forecast deficits this financial year. Okay, so I would put that we've got one nursery, as you know now, which is Newport Nursery. So I'm reporting on all schools, including the nursery. The second aspect about Norse is clearly there is a Norse board which exists in the council, where quality assurance issues can be fed back in. But in addition to the schools aspect, there is now a head teachers quality assurance group that works in collaboration with Norse, because actually we found that it's important there are head teachers of feeding back directly to Norse leaders. And so, for instance, the hope is that by working in collaboration and understanding the crux of the school issues, that can be then fixed within Norse. So, for instance, if there are capacity issues and there is not enough scope within Norse currently to be able to do those quotes, etc., we would hope that that's channeling the concerns, the compliments and the complaints through that group means that there should be some action that follows as a consequence.
Councillor Cleverly.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on deficits. As before COVID happened, I know quite a few schools had a large deficit, especially Clean. Was that deleted now after COVID with the extra money they had from the Welsh Assembly Government?
Caerleon successfully, with the support of the local authority, have gone back into a surplus position, and that's got nothing to do with the grants actually. So this is a position that that school particularly find themselves where they restructured and reconsidered their spend to have a surplus position, which means that the school has appropriate financial capacity moving forward without those grants. And so that's a really healthy position to be in. So we thank the school and the governing body and officers that work with them to get back into that really healthy financial position. And that's what our work is about largely. It's about challenging and supporting schools to work with them to get to a balanced budget position.
Thank you, Sarah.
Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. In the instance where schools do avoid an overspend and in some circumstances an underspend, if that was to continue year after year and they were managing their budget efficiently and effectively, could you give us reassurance that they would not be penalised, and is there an opportunity for them then to spend that underspend money that's left over on their own ideas and projects?
There are specific financial regulations that all local authorities have to apply to their schools, which are set by ministers in Welsh Government. So, for instance, we look at a 5% surplus, where a local authority, if under a 5% surplus, could not take money from schools. That 5% surplus is seen as a healthy surplus. With the current situation across Wales, the head of the School Standards Division wrote letters out to each local authority to reassure them that local authorities would not be penalised for seeing large surplus budgets in their schools, given the amounts of grants that were dropped off at the end of each financial year with COVID. In the history of Newport, we've never taken back anything above a 5% surplus position. However, one message which is really important is that schools do consider spending plans, so there's not just a pot that exists. I do think it's important that schools have our autonomy to be able to spend in an effective and a planned way, but also not forgetting that that money is not just for special projects, it's also for its pupils. And some spending can be short term, for a group of pupils, perhaps a vulnerable group of pupils that need that money and need that provision for a short period of time, and that should also be considered. So what we support is wise spending, and at present we have no plans to pulling back anything above that 5%.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're going to move on then, as there's no more questions. Oh, Councillor Al-Nuaimi.
Chair, my question is on page 38, actually.
Okay, well, we're heading towards that now. Page 36, page 37, page 38, Is that what your question's on,
Yes,
Councillor?
yes, thank you.
Thank
yeah.
you, Councillor.
It's probably me, but I'm taking this as being like a summary because it says about the service area and the annual performances measures, so it's about the collection of all the measures there. But why is it just seem to be focusing on the sort of percentage of 16 to 18-year-olds, which I consider maybe one measure only, is it? Can someone explain that? What was that page telling us exactly, please?
I could tell you that all other accountability measures have been, for education have been suspended by the Welsh Minister of Education at present while the new curriculum is being developed and new accountability measures are considered. So that's why there is only one measure there which relates to those children and young people not in education, employment and training.
I mean, that's, that clarifies it, but there's no way I could have ascertained that from that page. Could I?
Sorry, I was just checking. I know last year, for instance, it was in the service area forward.
Yeah.
I apologise if that's not in this year's. I'll make sure that next year, if that is necessary and we're still in this position, that that's clearly articulated.
Yeah, thank you. I tried to sort of say the necessary question, but I couldn't understand why that when you're only being focused. Someone speaking? Okay. But thank you for that.
Okay, thank you for your question, Councillor. Also on the same page 38, going forward, well, I don't want to speak about retrospectively, but 2.6 seems to be the magic number. How are we going to break that going forward?
Can I start by saying that in the 2021 data that you can see today, the performance, I don't even like to refer to it as performance, but the number of young people who didn't have a secure destination on leaving school is lower than the Welsh average. So in terms of our work in Newport, there's a lot of strength, and actually we were ranked 6th place in Wales based on that data alone. However, as you rightly point out, there has been a trend of 2.6% for a number of years now. The reason that the target is red for 2021 is that we set a target of 1.7% because we have aspirations to ensure that all young people have a secure destination on leaving school. Unfortunately, we didn't hit that target. There were a number of young people who had good GCSE outcomes, decided that they would stay on in sixth form, and then during that year 12 period, they found that staying in education wasn't for them, and that affected our outcomes. But you are right, Chair, in asking what are we doing to bring that figure down. So we know that our data is strong, we know that performance in Newport is strong, and we know that we have lower numbers of young people without a destination than many other areas of Wales, but that still isn't good enough for us as a city. So one of the things that we did last year was we talked to the young people and asked them what was needed in order to secure a destination for more learners. And they identified that they knew about what was available in sixth form in schools. They knew about the courses that were available in college for them, but they didn't really understand what training opportunities were available for them. And some of them indicated very, very clearly that if there was more information about training opportunities, then that would have opened the door to more destinations for them. So this year we've taken on board that feedback and we've held a series of what we've called moving on days. They've been hosted around the city. We've used some of the neighbourhood hubs and other locations, and we've asked training providers to come along to those moving on days and meet with young people who were unsure about their destination at the end of this academic year. We also organise an evening session where parents could come along with those children as well. So there was an opportunity for parents to meet with the training providers as well. And we've had very positive feedback from both the young people, the parents, the schools and the training providers about making sure that there's a better understanding of what training provision is available in the city for young people. And our hope is obviously that that is going to help us reduce that 2.6% figure down to closer to the 1.7 position that we were looking for last year, but even lower if possible as well.
Thank you for that answer, and like you, I look forward to seeing an even greater reduction of 1.7. I give no figure on it, but it's sounding promising, so thank you. Anything else on page 38? Okay, I believe that brings us to the end of what has been a comprehensive report. Would you like to add a few comments, Cabinet Member, if you like?
Working? Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to conclude this meeting. I hope you found the end-of-year service report helpful, particularly for our new members to gain an understanding of how education works within Newport. We're always available for questions or comments. That's our role. Grateful for the scrutiny. I think it helps us to always improve performance. And it's been a pleasure joining you here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Feel free to leave now, if you like. I don't want to detain you. Not